Hello everyone, my name is Nitin Nahar. I had secured rank 6 in my CA final exams. I'm a LLB graduate as well. I welcome you all on behalf of JK Shah classes to this May 2025 revision lectures. Now, in this lecture, before we start anything, let me clarify that there is no need of any new book, etc. Whatever is being used by you, you can rely on those books. This is just to give you a feel of the entire subject in a quick manner so that you understand how the provisions flow. That is the basic aim. First, we will talk about some constitutional provisions. Then we will be moving towards how the structure works when it comes to indirect taxes. Slowly and steadily we will discuss some important topics before entering a topic called as supply, and finally we will conclude with supply and end this first video. So that is going to be the structure. Now let me start with how does the entire IDT function. I have a very close friend, Mr. A. Say suppose he is a registered person. Now, he makes a outward supply. Now the question would be whether this is a supply under CGST Act. That is first question. How do you get the answer for this? 3 condition होते हैं. First, there should be a supply. Then, it should be for consideration. And finally, it should be in the course or furtherance of business. Thereafter, he has to check whether this is covered under negative list. Because if it is covered in negative list, then in that case there will not be any GST implication. So we will learn whether the supply is covered under negative list. वो सीखेंगे. उसके बाद the third point is in relation to whether there is any exemption available. So he has to also check whether it is exempt, because the moment it is exempt, there will not be any GST implication. Fair, there will not be any GST on this particular transaction. Thereafter, he has to select the rate of GST which is applicable on this transaction. Now, selection of rate of GST is not in your syllabus because the rates are given in the question paper. But classification is a very important issue. After that, he has to decide by when should he pay the tax, because please understand that there could be various events. There could be a date of invoice, उसके बाद date of payment, उसके बाद date of completion. So there could be multiple dates. Based on which date will he have to pay GST to government? Then he has to decide the type of tax to be charged, whether it should be C plus S, C plus UT GST or IGST. The clarity of that comes from a topic called as place of supply. And over and above all this, he has to check whether he was liable to register. Whether he was liable to register. This will be dealt in registration. The provisions of registration provide us कि whether that person has to take registration. Up coming to the purchase side. See, we call it as inward supply. Now on the purchase side, there can be two aspects: purchases under forward charge and purchases under reverse charge. So these are the two possibilities: forward charge and reverse charge purchases. Now, whether he will get input tax credit on all this is the next issue. Whether ITC is available. Thereafter, once he does all this, he has to do a tax payable computation. Based on all these data, he will derive his output tax और उसके बाद वो अपना ITC compute करेगा and finally he will get his tax payable. Now the moment you compute your tax payable, should you pay it to government? The answer is yes. You will learn the payment of tax in a chapter which is payment of GST. Once you pay the tax, are you required to report these? Yes, you are required to report these in GST returns. After your reporting, can there be a adjudication? Yes, officers checking what we have done is called as adjudication. Thereafter, if we are not satisfied with the adjudication, we go ahead and file a appeal. And there are some miscellaneous topics like we will learn about documentation, that is invoice, debit note, credit note. We will learn about a document called as e-way bill. Uske baad we will also understand about TDS, TCS under GST, which is very important. And then we also deal with export transactions specifically in a chapter called as refund. Thereafter, if we have a confusion कि पता नहीं चल रहा है whether tax will be applicable or not, we are not able to find what will be the tax implication on, then we can apply for advance ruling. And with rate, one important topic which we will always do is value of supply, because at the end of the day it is important to understand on what value will the tax be applicable. So basically a businessman has to understand this structure so that he can correctly discharge taxes and correctly pay taxes. That is the whole aim when it comes to taxation. Now, let's start dealing with each and every topic one by one. Pehle, we will start with constitutional provisions. Now, constitutional provisions, though you have only some part in your syllabus, but it's important to know the basics of constitutional provisions. Like Article 246, which provides for 3 lists. कौन से list है? Union list, state list and concurrent list. But GST does not come from these 3 lists. It comes from Article 246A and 269A. 246A basically deals with intrastate supply, where the power to levy GST is with both central government and state government. Then comes 269A, which gives the power to determine taxation on interstate supply, which is managed by central government. Obviously, Will central government eat away the entire tax? The answer is no. It will be apportioned to the states. And then there is a constitutional body which is under 279A, GST Council. Now you don't have the entire structure of GST Council, but you need to understand what is the role of GST Council. The role of GST Council is to give recommendations regarding GST to both central government and state government. That's the basic aim of GST Council. Post this, we move on to rate of tax. How do we select the rate of tax? Now, किसी भी transaction के लिए there can be only 3 combinations. The first combination is CGST plus SGST. Second one is CGST plus UTGST. And the third one is IGST. Now the first two are called as intrastate supplies. Now CGST and UTGST is applicable when the transaction is within 5 union territories. If the transaction is within these 5 union territories, then you will charge CGST plus UTGST. The first union territory being Ladakh. Then you have Chandigarh. Then you have Daman and Diu and Dadra and Nagar Haveli. Andaman and Nicobar. And finally Lakshadweep. Now what about other union territories? Now in other union territories, that is 3. Delhi, Puducherry, Jammu and Kashmir, CGST plus SGST will be applicable. So if the transaction is within 28 states plus Delhi, Puducherry and Jammu and Kashmir, then you will end up charging CGST plus SGST. Sir, how do we decide whether it is within the state? The law requires 2 things to be met. 2 चीज चेक करना होता है. पहला, location of the supplier needs to be checked. And second check is place of supply. Now where do we get to learn place of supply? It's a separate discussion. A place of supply or location of supplier, if it is in the same state or union territory, then in that case you will end up charging CGST plus SGST. If it is in 2 different states, 2 different union territories, 1 state, 1 union territory, then you end up charging IGST. So this is how you determine the type of tax. We need to be very strong with regard to the levies. That is 1. Third, the third transaction is related to registration limits. Very important discussion, because until and unless we know the registration limits, we will not be able to go through all the provisions applicable. Because in various exemption entries, there is a reference to registration limit. So we need to be aware of the registration limit beforehand. Now, registration limit is divided into 2 baskets. If you are only dealing in goods, then there are 3 limits: 40 lakh, 20 lakh and 10 lakh. If you are dealing with goods plus service or only service, then in that case there are two limits, that is 20 lakh and 10 lakh. Now 10 lakh is applicable for 4 states: Manipur, Tripura, Nagaland and Mizoram. You can remember it as MTNM. Yeah, whatever you have learnt, remember it that way. 20 lakh is applicable for 6 states: Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Telangana, Uttarakhand, Puducherry. I remember it as Mast UP. But whenever you remember Mast UP, you should also know the risk associated with it. Because if you know the risks, you will not make a mistake in the examination. There are 3 things with M: Meghalaya, Manipur, Mizoram. All 3 states come from northeastern territory. So you need to remember Meghalaya very well. If you remember Meghalaya very well, automatically you will be able to recall Manipur and Mizoram in 10 lakh. Then A, Assam is what you will get as a feeling when you sit and study next time, because Assam is also in northeastern, and the moment you recall Mast UP, you will get a feeling of Assam. It's not Assam. Assam is in 40 lakh limit. Arunachal Pradesh is the right answer. S, you will not face an issue. T, you will not face an issue. U, Uttarakhand. P, Puducherry. 40 lakh is applicable for all other states and union territories. Okay. When it comes to goods plus service or only service, 10 lakh is applicable for 4: Manipur, Tripura, Nagaland, Mizoram, and 20 lakh is applicable for all other states and union territories. Then the next critical discussion for us is order of utilizing ITC, which will play a very important role when we get into the sums. Now, order of utilizing ITC, there is a specific order given in the law. First one is, you use the order always from your inward supply. So whatever taxes you have used or paid on purchases, that you will use to pay your outward supply. So the moment you talk about IGST will be first utilized against IGST. Then I can be used against CGST or S/UT, and here the law mentions any order, any proportion. Any order, any proportion. Now, remember one very important aspect out of this. Whenever the ITC of C plus S is equal, then you can use this any order, any proportion, half-half. You will get the correct answer. But whenever you have more of one ITC, if you have more of CGST, then use I with I, then use I with S. so that you can get minimum tax payable. Don't forget the aim. The aim is to make the taxpayer pay less tax. Now, how can that be achieved? That can be achieved only when you utilize IGST correctly. When you use I with I, you have to use it by default. Then you have this provision called as any order, any proportion. Now when it says any order, any proportion, it is left to your discretion. And when we say it is left to your discretion, you will have to use it to pay the minimum tax. So remember, if the ITC of C and S is equal, then don't worry, use I against C and S equally. But if the ITC of CGST is more, then use I more against S, because you have less of SGST ITC compared to CGST. Then once you do this, thereafter you'll use CGST with CGST, and then C can be used against I. Never utilized C with S or S with C, because we don't want a fight between central government and state government relating to sharing of taxes or utilization of taxes. That's why government has been very clear that C cannot be utilized against S, S cannot be utilized against C. And whenever we say S, the reference to S will also include reference to UTGST. Then the law says SGST will be used against SGST, and then S or UT can be used against IGST. Following this order is mandatory because the law requires us to completely go by this order whenever we are utilizing input tax credit. Then our next discussion is about products which are outside GST. Now basically we have totally 6 products which are outside GST. Which are those 6 products which are outside GST? First, we have alcoholic liquor for human consumption. Remember, anything other than alcoholic liquor for human consumption, that is alcohol used in chocolates, alcohol used in perfumes, all that will be liable to GST. And then you have 5 petroleum products. These 5 petroleum products are petrol, high speed diesel, and petrol is also known as motor spirit. Then you have aviation turbine fuel, then you have natural gas, and lastly crude oil, that is petroleum crude. So these 5 products are also outside GST. Now anything other than these, if you get a new product in the exam like LPG, kerosene, base bitumen oil, then all those will be liable to GST, because you very well know what are the products which are outside GST. Everything else is covered under GST. There could be some exemptions, but exemptions relating to goods is not in your syllabus, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay, then we move on to the discussion of charging section. Now, charging section, basically we have section 9 for CGST Act, and we have section 5 for IGST Act. Now, to striking differences between 9 and 5 is 9 deals with intrastate supply, while 5 deals with interstate supply. 9 deals with a maximum rate of 20% which can be applied on the goods or services as recommended by GST Council. But the maximum rate under IGST is 40%. Thereafter, there is a discussion with regard to online money gaming. There was a lot of issue relating to online money gaming, and section 5 was amended to include online money gaming, saying that online money gaming will be subject to IGST, which we will deal in a separate video relating to online money gaming. Then, so basically we have 9.1 which deals with forward charge, and it says GST will apply on all goods or services except alcoholic liquor for human consumption. So it excludes only one product. The rate will be notified by government. It says central government because we are reading section 9 of CGST Act on the recommendation of GST Council. It says value will be as per section 15 of CGST Act, and the maximum rate which is given in section 9 is 20%. 9 subsection 2 talks about 5 petroleum products, saying that GST on these 5 petroleum products will be applicable from a later date to be notified by central government on the recommendation of GST Council. So it can apply from a later date. 9 subsection 3 talks about reverse charge. It says if there is a supplier and there is a recipient, then for notified goods or services. What is notified we will read in some time in some other video. But notified goods or services, recipient will be liable to pay tax directly to government. That is given under 9.3. Now I have a question for you. Which is a stronger provision, 9.3 or 9.1? Because say suppose something is mentioned under reverse charge mechanism. So will RCM be given more weightage or forward charge be given more weightage? The winning answer is RCM, because if some supply is covered under 9.3, then it has to be a case of reverse charge mechanism, because specific provision will override general provision. So which is the specific provision? 9.3. So we will first go by 9.3. If it is not covered by RCM, then by default it will be a case of forward charge. 9.4 also deals with RCM, but here the law has said notified goods or services, but a combination has to be met, that the supplier should be unregistered while the recipient should be a registered person. Then in that case, for notified goods or services, recipient will pay the tax directly to government. Now the difference between 9.3 and 9.4 is 9.3 there is no combination. Supplier can be anyone, recipient can be anyone. But 9.4, supplier has to be an unregistered person and recipient has to be a registered person. Only then 9.4 can trigger. When the law started, this notified word was any, which was very wide, and then government changed it to notified because it was having great implications on the businesses. And hence, at present, it uses notified. At present only one sector is notified, that is real estate sector, which we will talk separately in RCM. Then the final provision is 9.5. 9.5 says if there is a supplier who is supplying some notified services, careful, he is supplying some notified services through e-commerce operator, then in that case eco is liable to pay GST to government as if eco is the supplier, as if eco is the supplier. So 9.5 will trigger only when it is a notified service. Now, though we will discuss it in detail when we come to eco, but if you recall, 4 things are covered under 9.5. First one, transportation of passengers. The exclusion is omnibus by a company. Other than that, it is covered under 9.5. Then the second thing is restaurant service. Only one exclusion, where the restaurant is within a accommodation where the declared tariff of any of the accommodations is more than 7,500 per day. Third one was housekeeping. Fourth one, accommodation. And housekeeping and accommodation, if the supplier is liable to register, then it will be a case of 9.1. Only other than that, it would be a case of 9.5. We will anyways deal with it in detail in RCM and eco discussion. Now, coming to the main part, section 7. Section 7. Now, section 7 of CGST Act defines the scope of supply. Is supply a very important discussion? Yes, because in the entire charges section, the law uses the term interstate supply, intrastate supply. So the importance of supply is dealt in a separate section, section 7 of CGST Act. Now the law says that if 3 conditions are met, then it becomes a supply under section 7. There should be a supply for consideration, and it should be in the course or furtherance of business. Now, if all these 3 conditions are met, then in that case, the transaction is regarded as a supply under section 7. Now, supply has various terms such as sale, exchange, barter, transfer, lease, license, rental, and disposal. Now, consideration can be of 3 types. It can be monetary consideration, it can be non-monetary consideration, or it can be a act or forbearance. Act or forbearance is agreeing to do something. Forbearance is agreeing not to do something. Now, be very careful. When we say act or forbearance, there should be a positive agreement for non-performance, like non-compete agreements. Now, what happens in non-compete agreements? I agree not to compete against you for a consideration. That's a non-compete agreement where there's a positive agreement for not doing something. Breach of contract is never regarded as a supply. If there is a breach of contract, then in that case, that is not the intention of the contract. You don't enter into a contract so that the other person breaks the contract and you earn from it. Correct? So CBIC has clarified that breach of contract will not be regarded as a supply because you don't enter into a contract to breach it. Then any deposit which is given will not be liable to GST. But if there is an advance which is paid, then such advance would be liable to GST. Talking about government subsidy, GST will not be applicable. Any person other than government paying subsidy will be covered under GST. Note one point. The definition of consideration only excludes government subsidy. It does not exclude subsidy given by a local authority. So local authority subsidy would be liable to GST as it would form part of consideration, because the law talks only about government, that is central government and state government. Obviously its departments will be covered but not local authority. Then the definition of business is very wide. It covers trade, it covers profession, it covers manufacturing, it covers vocation, that's a skill class or skill development program. It covers adventure in the nature of trade, adventure, and it says whether or not there is any frequency, continuity, it doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter whether it is for a profit motive or not. Very, very wide. But say suppose a person is selling his personal asset, then in that case there is a CBIC FAQ saying that sale of personal assets will not be liable to GST even if it is sale of some old jewelry which was with him. Then you have admission, which basically talks about entry fee. Then wager. Betting, gambling, lottery is also a business. The answer is yes. We don't believe in legal, illegal. Association, providing services to members, that is also considered to be business. Holding an office, holder of an office, meaning holding a post, is also business. Central government, state government, local authority, doing anything as a public authority, that is also considered as part of business. We don't even exclude government. You would have already seen this in exemption, where government related services also can be subject to GST. Now, if you notice, the definition of business is kept very wide. In fact, any closure of business and sale of assets thereon will also be subject to GST. Okay. Now, association and members went till Supreme Court in service tax. The question was whether service tax would be applicable between a transaction of association and members. Supreme Court in Calcutta Club decision said association and members are same and hence there cannot be any service tax between them. Now, after this decision, government was taken aback and government thought, what will happen if the same thing is said even for GST? They immediately amended the law and said any activity or transaction between association and members is deemed to be a supply and hence GST would be applicable. See, it was already covered by the definition of business, but where was it missing? It was missing from supply terminology, and then they added saying that activity between those two will be a supply and those two are regarded as distinct persons or separate persons per se. That clause talks about a person other than individual and its constituents or members. It's so wide. that even partner and partnership firms will be regarded as different persons for the purpose of GST law. Now, one important discussion before we move forward is transfer. See, when there is a transfer of some assets or stock from one branch in one state and another branch in another state, that is also regarded as a supply. In fact, in some time we will see that it is a supply without consideration. GST will be applicable even without consideration. So say suppose Mr. A is having one branch in Bangalore and has another branch in Delhi, and he sends some goods from Bangalore to Delhi. Whether GST will be applicable on this stock transfer? The answer is yes. Further, CBIC has clarified that when we talk about stock transfer, it should be a permanent transfer. I mean, it should not be a temporary transfer for some time. Say suppose we send some tools to Delhi branch for doing some repair activity, and those tools come back. Then it is not a supply of those tools. There can be a separate supply for that service, but there is no supply for those tools or vehicle moving from Bangalore to Delhi. There will not be any GST implication on that vehicle because vehicle will have to move. There is no movement for further supply. But say suppose I am a dealer of vehicles, and as a dealer of vehicles I send the vehicles from Bangalore to Delhi for further supply from the recipient branch. Then in that case GST will be applicable. So this stock transfer is also covered by the supply meaning. So this was when all the three conditions are satisfied. Now the question is, can GST apply where one of the conditions are not satisfied? Like the first discussion was three conditions to be satisfied, then GST will be applicable. What if consideration is missing? Can GST apply? There are totally 4 transactions where GST can apply even without consideration. The first one being permanent transfer of a business asset where ITC was availed. Permanent transfer of a business asset where ITC was availed. If you have availed ITC, then anything you give free of cost. See, without consideration basically means giving free. If you are giving something free out of your business, because it is in the course of your business, giving free out of your business, like giving free samples, giving free gifts, then in that case GST will generally not apply because all three conditions needs to be satisfied. But if you have availed ITC on purchase of those things which are given as free, then in that case, as you have taken a benefit from government by availing ITC, you will also have to discharge output tax on this transaction. Second, related person, distinct person. Related person, distinct person. What's the meaning of related person? Related person basically covers directors or officers in one another's business, partners of a partnership firm, employer, employee, holding more than 26% in 2 companies, then both of them are considered as related persons. Thereafter, we have a clause relating to one controlling another, 2 controlling one, 1 controlling 2, family. Family covers spouse plus children plus dependent, grandparents, parents, brother, sister. All these are considered as family. The moment a related person transaction is triggered, even if it is without consideration, the law very clearly says that we will need GST on this transaction. Distinct persons are branches in different states. They are always distinct person, or branches in same state which are registered separately. Say suppose in Karnataka I have two branches and for both I have taken a separate GST number, then they are also distinct person. And sir, what about branches in different states? See, there you will anyways have to take separate GST number if at all registration is required, but they will always be regarded as distinct person. So a transaction between distinct person is liable to GST even if it is without any consideration. The third transaction is principal and agent. But remember, it is only for principal and agent relating to goods. And the condition is agent should bill in his own name. Let's have a look at the transaction. Say suppose there is a principal, there is an agent, and there is a customer. Now, agent is making a taxable supply, and agent is billing in his own name. That means GST identification number of agent is being used to bill to customer. Then in that case, see, principal will have to charge GST to someone. So this is covered by Schedule 1. Schedule 1 says this transaction between principal and agent will be covered by Schedule 1, liable to GST even without consideration. Now, be careful about questions which can come in the exam. See, agent billing to customer. If you get the question from the angle of agent, this transaction is outward supply for agent, and this transaction is inward supply for the agent. That means if you are computing GST for agent, then this is outward supply and principal supplying it is inward supply for the agent. Plus, agent will raise a commission invoice. Now, what about this commission invoice? Commission invoice which is issued by the agent, for the agent it will be regarded as outward supply. Outward supply for agent, and principal will get ITC, correct? And hence for principal it will be inward supply. So it depends on from whose angle are you solving a sum. So inward supply for principal. Be very careful of inward and outward. Don't make a mistake in giving treatment of output and input. So be careful on this transaction. Then after this, let's discuss about last transaction, that is import of service. Now, import of service can be with consideration or it can be without consideration. So first let's talk about without consideration, which is covered by Schedule 1. Now if it is without consideration, then GST will apply only when it is in the course of business plus from a related person. If it is not from a related person, then without consideration import of service is not regarded as a supply. With consideration, there is a supply. Consideration, let me tell you, this is an exception where even if it is not in the course or furtherance of business, GST can still apply. In fact, in the entire GST law, there is only one case where GST can apply even without business, that is not in the course or furtherance of business, and that case is import of service. Though when it is received by some consumers, there are some exemptions, plus some cases a supplier outside India has to pay tax. Such cases are also there, but the primary discussion is, even when it is not in the course or furtherance of business, one transaction can be regarded as a supply, and that is import of service for a consideration. So be careful relating to this particular point, which will be tested in some big questions or the first question, that is a compulsory question. Okay, now these four transactions are together called as schedule 1 transactions. Then do we have schedule 2 as well? The answer is yes, we have schedule 2. Now schedule 2 basically provides classification. It says whenever there is a transfer of title in goods, that is ownership is getting transferred, it will be regarded as supply of goods. Whenever there is a transfer of right to use, it will be regarded as a supply of service. Title, ownership getting transferred, it is a supply of goods. Right to use being given, it will be regarded as a supply of service. We'll take some examples. Say suppose title of the goods is transferred at a future date, like hire purchase, it will be regarded as supply of goods, because though title is getting transferred at a future date, title is getting transferred and hence it is supply of goods. Business asset transferred, supply of goods. Private use of business asset, service, because right to use is happening. Closure of business, and where a person ceases to be a taxable person, gives up his GST registration, then again it will be regarded as supply of goods. What about a case where there is renting of immobile property? Service. Restaurant, service. Works contract, which is a combination of goods and services for a immobile property, again it would be regarded as a service. Transfer of title, goods. Transfer of right to use, service. Treatment or process applied on any other person's goods, service. Temporary transfer in an intellectual property right, service. Software upgradation, customization, design, development would be regarded as a service. Okay, then we move on to schedule 3. What does schedule 3 deal with? Schedule 3 deals with negative list. Now negative list contains the list of goods or services. These are goods or services, careful, which is not regarded as supply. That means they are goods or services, but they will not be regarded as a supply, and hence GST would not get triggered. Charging section itself doesn't get triggered. Careful, it is not a supply. It is goods or services, but it is not a supply. Sir, are there some things which are not regarded as goods or services? The answer is yes. Goods and services exclude money and securities. But sir, what about any charges for arranging a transaction of money? Then it will be liable, like a fee paid for demand draft, a fee paid for exchange of foreign currency, a fee paid for exchanging old notes with new notes. That will be considered as a service. Securities, shares are also not considered as goods, neither considered as service. But what about brokerage, lending of securities, borrowing of securities, any fee or commission paid to a middleman? All that will be regarded as a service, because only a transaction in money or securities is outside GST. Sir, what about actionable claim? Actionable claim is included in the definition of goods. So any actionable claim is considered as goods. Now coming back to our discussion of not a supply. The first one is immovable property, but it does not cover every immovable property. It talks about sale of land, sale of building, except when it is under construction. Now, immovable property, if you purchase a under construction property, then in that case it is liable to GST. Sir, how can we call something as under construction? Now, the law defines it. Under construction is only when you purchase a property before completion certificate or first occupation, whichever is earlier. Before completion certificate or first occupation, whichever is earlier. That means if someone has started occupying that building, then in that case it is considered as a complete property. After that, if you purchase, then it is called as a constructed property. It's covered by negative list. So be very careful. Constructed property is covered by negative list. How do you decide whether it is under construction or constructed? Check completion certificate or first occupation, earlier of the two. Say suppose you have got completion certificate, it's a complete property. Say suppose someone has started living there, again it is considered as a complete property. Then actionable claim. Actionable claim is also covered by negative list, but there are certain things which are excluded. Now, the purpose of including actionable claim in the definition of goods was to tax these which are going to be seen now, because first it was included, then it was kept in negative list, so anyways no GST. But the important segment is other than, because whatever is other than these, that is covered by negative list, but whatever we are going to learn now is liable. It says other than specified actionable claim. Specified actionable claim, and the specified actionable claims are betting, gambling, lottery, horse racing, casino, and lastly online money gaming. Now all these are actionable claim because you deposit money or money's worth and that is being played with, and it depends on a future event, plus it is unsecured debt. So all these are actionable claims, but all these 6 will be liable to GST. Then we have employee providing service to employer in the course or in relation to employment, or in relation to employment. So if it is related to employment, then employee receiving anything from employer, because employee is providing the service and then he will get back something from the employer. So when employee is providing this and getting something from the employer, GST will not be applicable. Plus gift from employer to employee up to 50,000 rupees is also not liable to GST. No GST, sir? No. Up to 50,000 per financial year and per employee is not a supply. Okay, what about anything else, sir? Anything else? If employer is giving something else which is not part of employment contract, then in that case GST will be triggered. Now, then the negative list also covers fees taken by court or tribunal. So any court or tribunal taking any fees is not liable to GST. Constitutional persons or members of body like MPs, MLAs or member of local authorities or panchayats are also covered by negative list. Any constitutional person like head of CAG, Comptroller and Auditor General of India, head of Election Commission, President, Prime Minister, they are also covered by negative list. Then we have member of any body established by central government, state government, local authority. And finally, we have funeral, burial, crematorium, mortuary, including transportation of deceased. Remember crematorium, mortuary carefully. Then you have alcoholic liquor license. And finally, panchayat providing any service under Article 243G of the Constitution as to be provided by the local authority. GST would not be applicable on all these transactions. Now just for remembering, I'm just adding M. There is nothing for M, there is nothing for G, so that we can remember it easily. Image, FMCM, Finance Minister, Chief Minister, both are covered under negative list, and FAB, funeral, alcoholic liquor license, panchayat, because alcoholic liquor is already there in charging section exclusion. This is alcoholic liquor license, the license which is given by state government, that is also covered by negative list. Now, two very important transaction which I will add for G. Non-taxable territory to non-taxable territory. That means the goods are going from one non-taxable territory to another non-taxable territory. What's non-taxable territory? Outside India. What's taxable territory? India. So from one non-taxable territory to another non-taxable territory is covered by negative list. So if the goods are going from US to Sri Lanka without entering India, then in that case it is covered by negative list. Then we have high sea sale or warehoused goods. High sea sale or warehoused goods. Warehoused goods. This you will learn better in customs, because high sea sale is selling the goods even before goods have been imported into India. So while the goods are coming from US to India, before the goods come to India, you have sold those goods. Now if you sell those goods, the person who is going to purchase it, he is going to pay custom duty. Custom duty has an inbuilt IGST, and that's why, as IGST is already levied as part of custom duty, the main transaction of high sea sale is kept in negative list. Secondly, warehoused goods. Again, warehoused goods is also excluded from supply. GST will not apply. Which warehouse are we talking about, sir? Custom warehouses, because you can store the goods in custom warehouse, then you can clear the goods from there, or you can even sell the goods while they are in warehouse. So if I sell the goods while they are in warehouse, I sell it to B, then B will pay custom duty. That custom duty will have IGST, and hence government has given the main entry in negative list so that there is no double GST applicable on these transactions. So non-taxable territory to non-taxable territory, high sea sale or warehoused goods. The last discussion in this is section 8, which deals with composite supply and mixed supply. Now, when can you call something as a composite supply? There are 4 conditions. 2 or more goods or services being supplied in conjunction. Conjunction meaning being supplied together. 1 is a principal supply. You can identify that 1 is the main supply. And last one, it is naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. Naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. Now, say suppose we talk about coaching classes with books. Coaching classes with books is 2 or more supplied in conjunction. What is the principal supply? Coaching classes. Is it naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business? Yes. What do we mean when we say naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business? That means in the entire business, there is this practice of giving naturally bundled services together by most of the businesses in that particular industry. So, most of the coaching classes also provide books with that. That's when we call something as naturally bundled. Can natural bundling change with time? The answer is yes. And hence, every point of time there can be different natural bundles. What will be the GST rate applicable? The rate of GST which will apply will be rate of the principal supply. Okay, then mixed supply. Now mixed supply is where 2 or more goods or services are being supplied in conjunction, and it is not a composite supply. Meaning, not a composite supply meaning first you will always check whether it is composite supply. If it is not a composite supply, only then you can check whether it is a mixed supply. And last one, single price. Sir, if different prices are there, then it can never become a mixed supply. Then if it is not a composite supply and there is no single price, then it will be individual supplies. Separate GST rates will apply to each of the bundles. Now, be very careful that the rate of GST which will apply in this case will be highest rate amongst the products. One very important aspect is when you talk about composite supply, there is no condition of single price. That means in composite supply, even if there is different pricing but naturally bundled, then in that case it still can be regarded as a composite supply. Like movie tickets along with food being provided together, then in that case movie ticket is the principal supply rate will be applicable. So be careful on these points. Now, some circulars which are important for your examination. First, any interstate movement of vehicles or conveyance or tools, rigs, dies, jigs, fixtures between distinct persons will not be liable to GST unless the movement is for further supply from the recipient branch. Any service being provided. So say suppose I have a machine and I get a project in Chennai. I am from Bangalore, I get a project in Chennai. So if I am moving that machine from Bangalore to Chennai to do a works contract, then it is not a supply from Bangalore to Chennai because it is going there just to complete the work and the machine will come back. Hence, it will not be regarded as a supply liable to GST. Then, joint venture. Say suppose 4 people come together and form a joint venture GST will not apply on the contributions made by each of them. But say suppose there is some additional consideration or something additionally being done by one of the joint venture partners, for which he might get some additional consideration from other joint venture partners, then that additional work which is being done by one of the joint venture partners is a supply which is being provided by him to the joint venture, that will be subject to GST. Then the law also talks about agreeing to an obligation. If I agree to an obligation and I charge a consideration for not doing something or for doing something, then in that case GST will apply. But breach of contract is never a supply. One important thing in this is, if something is a common industry practice like hotel cancellation charges, flight cancellation charges, then it will be regarded as a supply, as clarified by CBIC. CBIC has been very clear on this particular aspect. Plus some new entries have been added like ESOPs. Now what happens is, ESOPs is given. ESOP is given to employees. Whether GST will apply on ESOPs? No. And sometimes foreign ESOPs are given. Meaning ESOP, say suppose I take an example of Amazon employee. So Amazon India is the employer, but it will give the ESOPs of Amazon US. Now whether these ESOPs will be liable, and what about the money which Amazon India is paying to Amazon US? That will also not be liable if it is on cost to cost basis. If Amazon US is charging a premium, then in that case it will be liable to GST. Plus say suppose there is a related person transaction and loan is given, loan from related persons. Now loan from related persons, they will only charge interest. Say suppose they have only charged interest. Interest is a exempt supply, which you will see in exemption revision. So if only interest is charged, no GST anyways. If processing fee is not charged, then department cannot say that there is some processing fee hidden in interest and pay GST on that. Now if processing fee is being charged, then liable. If it is not being charged, then there cannot be a notional value of processing fee which can be added. Then one more very important circular was insurance company, when they sell the salvage. Salvage is the leftover, salvage or wreckage. We also called it as wreckage. Wreckage is basically the leftover parts which is being damaged. So if they sell it, if they have paid full money to the insured, then sale of salvage is their property. If sale of salvage is their property, if it is property of insurance company, then GST applicable. But if it is property of insured, that means I have already deducted some money because I deduct something for salvage which he can sell. If it is property of insured, then no GST in the hands of insurance company, because then it will be sold by the insured and it is completely his lookout. I don't have to worry. Plus one more important new circular which had come was relating to GTA, Goods Transport Agency, also providing loading unloading services. Then the transportation service is the principal supply, loading and unloading are incidental or ancillary to the main supply. But if loading unloading are provided separately, then in that case GST would be applicable. Let's take 5 minutes to sum up this entire discussion. We have read a lot of points. Let's see all the points together. See, first we understood the structure as to how everything works in GST. Why do we read the topics which we read? there are businesses which have to worry about outward supply, inward supply, appeal mechanisms, adjudication, invoicing, TDS, TCS, valuation, exemption. All these are required to compute your GST correctly. Then we moved on to constitutional provisions, where we discussed 246, 246A, 269A, 279A. Rate of tax, we came across three combination of rate of tax. Remember, Delhi, Jammu and Kashmir, Puducherry are considered as a state. Registration limit, we dealt with various registration limits which are applicable for goods and only services or goods plus services. Order of utilizing, be careful of how you utilize ITC, very important. I with I, then I with C or S, any order, any proportion. C with C, C with I, S with S, S with I. Order mandatory to follow. First you can use only A, then only you can enter into B, then after that you can enter into C. So following this order is mandatory. Products which are outside in GST, you are already aware of it. Charging section, we dealt with 9.1 which deals with forward charge, 9.2 5 petroleum products, 9.3 RCM, 9.4 RCM, 9.5 ECO is responsible for notified services which are supplied through ECO as if he is the supplier. Section 7, we moved on to three important conditions for GST are to apply. Supply, consideration in the course or furtherance of business, types of consideration in the definition of consideration, deposits, if adjusted then it will be liable as consideration, meaning I make a deposit, I don't pay the money, they will adjust that deposit against the dues, then it becomes consideration. Business definition is very wide, tries to cover each and every aspect which can be taxed. Basically an activity or transaction is getting taxed. Association and members are deemed to be separate persons and any transaction between them is deemed to be a supply. Then we moved on to 4 transactions where GST can apply even without consideration. Permanent transfer of a business asset where ITC was taken, related person, distinct person transactions, principal and agent for goods where the billing is in the name of agent, import of service, if it is without consideration it should be in the course of business plus from a related person. If it is with consideration, then in that case it is not required to be in the course or furtherance of business. Then we moved on to schedule 2, classification, transfer of title is regarded as goods, transfer of right to use is regarded as a service. Schedule 3 basically deals with negative list, immovable property, under construction, liable, constructed, not liable, actionable claim, not liable, betting, gambling, lottery, horse racing, casino, online money gaming, liable, goods to transactions, non-taxable territory to non-taxable territory or high sea sale or warehoused goods, not liable, employee to employer in the course of employment or in relation to employment, not liable, gift up to 50,000 between employer and employee, not liable, fees taken by court or tribunal, MP, MLA, constitutional person, member of body established by central government, state government. Lastly, funeral, alcoholic liquor license and panchayat, not liable to GST. Finally, section 8, composite supply and mixed supply. Composite supply, 2 or more goods or services supplied in conjunction where one of them is a principal supply, naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. Principal supply rate will be applicable. Mixed supply, 2 or more goods or services supplied in conjunction, not a composite supply and a single price, then highest rate will be applicable. Go through the circulars again from the content which you have read. Also you can refer to the amendment video to understand these circulars in details.